With Ukip and Nigel Farage, you have seen a concerted and more sophisticated attempt than Britain has seen previously at bringing in these financially struggling and pessimistic voters into the mainstream political fold and getting them back into politics, because these are voters who have come from groups who were steadily drifting away from our mainstream political arena. If you take a longer term view of Ukip support, you quickly realise that they are actually tapping into widespread public discontent with Westminster politics in general, not just David Cameron, but David Cameron and Ed Miliband, and not just the current generation of political leaders, but elites in general, because Ukip are rallying voters who feel very disconnected from our professional, middle class, slightly London focused, quite cosmopolitan establishment, and Nigel Farage has been relentlessly attacking that. And it is a view that is shared by a large number of Ukip voters who simply look at Westminster politics, who look at the media, who look at the European Union, and they see institutions that do not represent them and they feel are not capable of responding to the issues that they feel very intensely about, namely the European Union, immigration, and the state of our politics. It's important to remember that Ukip were founded in 1993. They've been through 20 odd years of peaks and troughs, and they've been led by a number of different figures during that time. Farage has brought them the most electoral success by some way. He is also the most externally charismatic and resonant figure that the radical right in Britain has had. He's also one of the most articulate leaders that probably the radical right across Europe has had. But Ukip are tapping into divisions that have been building in British society for the 70s. And so it isn't simply Farage who is mobilising those, they have been there. He's recognised the strength of those divisions, and he's recognised the power of delivering a message to those voters. He's telling them to say no to Europe, say no to Westminster, and say no to immigration. But these underlying currents in British society will still be there long after Nigel Farage has come and gone. So he is very important to explaining UKIP's success in general, but by himself he can only tell part of the story about why these voters are voting the way that they are. Some of UKIP's electorate are intolerant towards migrants and minorities, but by its nature, UKIP is not a racist political party in the same way that, say, far-right political parties are, for example, the British National Party, nor does UKIP have a history of anti-Semitism or overt racial prejudice like parties in Europe do, for example, the French National Front. In fact, a majority of UKIP's voters in some of the surveys that have been run since 2009 almost go out of their way to avoid those traditionally racist statements. So I think it's very careful that we don't simply point at UKIP and scream racism or bigots as a way of trying to think that this will somehow neutralise the voters. If anything, it could make it a lot worse, because these are voters who feel as though they are not allowed to have a conversation over immigration and the extent and the pace of social change in British society today. These are voters who want to talk with their mainstream representatives about, why is my community changing so quickly? Why is it that, I was never asked about these large and unprecedented demographic changes? This is a conversation that people want to have. They don't want to be shouted down. The key question for UKIP now, though, is can they hold on to those European voters as we then go into this 2015 general election? At the previous European Parliament elections in 1999, in 2004, in 2009, UKIP lost a lot of their European vote as they went into the general election. In fact, in some years, almost 2 million UKIP voters went AWOL. They went back to the mainstream parties, or they didn't turn out at all. The key challenge for Farage and UKIP now is to sit down and think, well, how on earth do we keep those UKIP voters as we go into the parliamentary general election in 2015? How do you convince those voters that UKIP is not a wasted vote at the general election? So that's the big challenge facing UKIP, but as things stand right now, they are on course to deliver a historic result on May the 22nd.